Hey there, aspiring horror authors. It's another episode of Sako and the Moon, created by two self-published horror authors. Oh, that's no bueno. Today we're talking about complex female characters in horror fiction. I am Sako Toomey, artist and author and a bunch of other things, but we'll just talk about how I'm a self-published author 3 times over. I've been working on my craft for decades, and I'd like to share my skills with you guys.
And on the moon. Once published, film writer, filmmaker, screenwriter, published author. That's always still fun to say. And panelist at the upcoming Imaginarium convention.
Yeah, me too.
I feel like that's the thing now, because now as panelists and recognizing people as panelists, you see that they have thoughts and opinions on industry stuff. And that's kind of what we're doing here. It's like, it brings credibility. Like outside of YouTube,
we're doing it in person too. Yeah, exactly.
Hear what we have to say. So you can hear us do this at Imaginarium in July in Louisville, Kentucky.
Yeah.
They should pay us for that, but they didn't.
But they don't.
It's fine. We love it
anyway. Fine. So creating complex female protagonists in horror fiction involves developing well-rounded, multidimensional characters who drive the story forward and resonate with readers on a deeper level. So there are several strategies to consider. Number 1, depth and nuance. 1, give a backstory. Give your protagonist a rich backstory that explains her motivations, fears, and strengths. This can include past traumas, personal achievements, or unique experiences that shape who she is. On that note, I'm sure you had a question that kind of pertains to that.
Well, I do, but as you mentioned that, just to give an example of that, so there was, in the movie The Descent, the main character, Sarah, has the movie starts off with a trip with her family, her husband, her child, and her best friend, and there's an accident that takes place on this trip. She loses her husband, she loses her daughter, and then this leads into the 1 year later, the time frame of the story, and that's the backstory. It's short, it's simple, so it doesn't always have to be this long, drawn-out war. It can just be something, but when you see that everyone's rallying around this character, this is the reason why. When she's going back to doing, cave diving stuff, and she's kind of hesitant or she's kind of weird about it, this is the reason why. So these are the things she's overcoming, which in that strength is where that, the overcoming power comes from. But I did have a question, because men and women write female characters differently. And I was always told that if you want to write a really strong female character, you write a strong male character, but then just make it female.
I think you just write a strong person, and whether they're non-binary or female or male, and then slap the gender on them after the fact.
Well, as we'll discuss today, I'm sure, over the next 55 minutes or whatever, there are elements that make a character strong. And there are elements that make a person strong. If you think about in your life who the strongest person, you want to say the strongest woman in your life is, what is it about them that makes them the strongest? More so, what is it about them that makes you say that about them? When you think about those miscellaneous elements, they overcame a struggle, They they're considered successful by whatever metric you're looking at, whether
Mhm.
financial or status or whatever metric you're looking at to give somebody strength. Those are the elements that you need to give your character. And if that character happens to be female, congratulations, you have a
So be
strong
it.
female character.
Yeah.
It really isn't that hard. Like,
On the topic of the descent, one of the points that I wrote about as far as nuances was the internal conflict, was her struggle to get back into caving, show her internal struggles, which can add layers to her character. This could be a conflict between her fears and her need to survive, or a moral dilemma.
yeah, and I know with the descent specifically, um, it wasn't so much her idea; it was the best friend's idea, and the best friend was the one that was with her on the initial trip where her family died.
Right.
So it's one of those things where the friend was like, you've been wallowing in your sadness. You need to put yourself in a position to move on and get over things, and basically the friend is trying to force Sarah into Juno. Juno's trying to force Sarah into dealing with her internal struggle.
Hmm.
So you have the resistance that you have because you don't want to get over it, and then you have the external struggle of being pushed, excuse me, by the best friend, and then of course there's the antagonist that happens on two fronts. Great. If you've not seen The Descent, go watch it. It's a
Go watch it.
master class in simple but effective horror.
It was one of the first movies that I saw that had a strong, not Alien, right? Because we can't fault, Ripley for being awesome, but she was one of the modern movies that showed me a strong female protagonist that made it through the event, made it through the story, and it kind of changed the way I looked at horror, and kind of changed the way that I looked at certain authors, like Joss Whedon, for instance. Um, Joss Whedon also is he's a writer that writes a strong person and then makes them female.
Yeah, and that's horror opens the door for trauma. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and basically horror is just like, how is person A going to deal with trauma B and make it to the end? Like that's basically the formula to literally any and every horror, right? Um, Either the event is currently horrific or a person's overcoming something that was horrific and traumatic, and that's horror in general. And a lot of times men in horror are portrayed so much better than women in horror. And the strong male character is so cliche, really, but it's also so societally normatic, like just normal, that it's that we have topics like like the subject of this episode, where we have to specify how to make a complex and strong female character because people don't want to do it. Now, fair enough, there's been a revolution in horror. I said like maybe last 10 years or so,
Yeah.
at least 10, 15, where we're starting to realize that there are a lot of strong female characters, but High Tension is a good example of a strong female protagonist with a very meek uh, female character in the friend, Anna. There's Anna and Marie. And Marie's the one that's the strong, tough, badass, blah, 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 blah. But you kind of have to put an asterisk by it when you see what the twist at the end of the movie is.
Yeah.
But then you look at characters like Anna. who is so quiet and so meek and so just terrified that it's really hard to almost take everything so seriously, because it's like, I get that you'd be traumatized in a kidnapping after watching your family getting murdered,
Get murdered. Yeah.
but it's like, is this really the space you'd be in? And again, the twist really fucks with it. So
Yeah.
so well, that's a different episode.
That's a different episode.
That's a different episode
On a different show.
on a different show. I've actually done that show. That's the Necronomic.com on the episode of High Tension. I featured.
We should put a link in the description then.
Yeah, I featured on that episode, and I talked about that movie in depth.
In depth. Ad nauseam.
Because you haven't met me before.
So it's funny that you mentioned cliches, right? So you want to, the cliche for the female character and the stereotype you tend to come across is the damsel in distress.
Yep.
And we want to imbue her with a mix of strengths and vulnerabilities. So she can be resourceful, intelligent, but flawed and emotionally complex.
Yes, because that's people. People are, emotionally flawed. All of us are. I've gone through some things. You've gone through some things. Whoever's watching this, you've gone through some things, whether you've dealt with that trauma or not. And ultimately, it boils down to this. We've all gone through some good times, and we've all gone through some bad times. The individual definition of good times and bad times will change from person to person, right. Lifestyle to lifestyle, experience to experience. But we've all had to endure the storm before we saw the sunshine again. And those downtime events and the impact that those moments have had on us, those directly impact how we view and interact with similar situations in the future. And that is how you create nuance. That's how you create complexity in a character. Because, Jack and Jill go up the hill. We don't know anything about Jack. We don't know anything about Jill. What if Jack's got a fear of heights? Right? What if the last time Jill went up the hill, she broke her ankle? Now you've got a completely different story. Yeah. Jack's scared to go too far up the hill. She's taking very careful steps going up now you've got a complex story, because now how they're dealing with this task is completely different than the fairy tale will tell us, the nursery rhyme or whatever. And it's that simple sometimes. The backstory, like you mentioned before, complex. Now things are nuanced. Now we have a complexity in the story. Cheers.
Hi, RC. R.C. Scott is a fellow horror writer and one of my favorites. He specializes in short stories and novellas and novelettes, which we'll talk about, like different forms of short fiction in a later episode. But yeah. RC is probably the only author that I've done, I've read the most books of, and I've done reviews on.
Cheers.
Yeah, specialize in death.
The beauty of horror.
Yeah.
Because worse than death is like the secret to horror, like the secret sauce of horror. Like how do you put a character through a situation worse than death?
And
that's trauma, and that's makes the character complex as they go through the rest. And as we know, men are viewed differently than women societally, so to make things palatable for the audience, they're written differently. I don't think they should be.
I don't think they should be. So in order to make our female character not a damsel in distress. We want to give her agency.
Right.
So ensure your protagonist has agency and makes meaningful decisions that impact the plot. She should not just react to the events, but actually respond. And it's her reaction to these things that makes the story and influences the story's direction.
So can you like just specify that separation, the difference between just reacting to something and responding to
Well, if it is a story where stuff happens to them and they are just taking it,
it? Yeah.
it makes for we want to see them succeed. That is the point of fiction. And if they don't react, we don't see the story move forward, really.
Right.
It's just a series of events that, like, just if they go, oh gee golly whiz, my life sucks right now, and we don't see them try to fix that,
Right.
It impacts the story in a negative way.
It gets boring. And the
Mhm.
key to writing any main character, male, female, or otherwise, successfully in a piece, we have to give a damn.
We have to give a damn.
And it's got to be that strong. You have to care. You have to create a character that we want to see succeed. To not just, I mean, otherwise, why are we watching? And we won't watch. Most people, it's like, I can't stand this good guy. Well,
Mhm.
unless you're cheering for the bad guy. That's always the thing.
Which is usually what I do.
But, you know,
I
to make
love making villains and we'll talk about writing villains in a future episode, but like, I love writing villains.
I mean, when you got
No one
franchise
thinks they're the villain. No one thinks they're the bad guy.
Again, this we can go on a huge tangent.
This could be a tirade. Like I said, this can be.
I want to pause because I hear my argument, my defense in my head. I'm like, no. I'm talking about strong complex
female characters.
But we have
can
to have
talk about the competence. Like, yeah.
So okay, so before I switch topics, because I know I will, I'm good at that. You have to have a character that we like. So when you're putting your female character, and this honestly applies to any character, through the ringer to create that backstory, and now we see them as they stand with trauma in the present, don't just make them a bitch and call that strong. That is such a cliche that bugs everybody. Like, oh, I'm just gonna make her a sassy smartass, and she's just kind of standoffish to everyone because she dealt with trauma. It's like, no, that's not.
That's a trope.
Not how that works. It's a terrible trope.
It
the
is.
problem is that these things are how we perceive the people in our world. You know, so if this is how some young 15-year-old watches horror and sees, oh, this girl went through a trauma, now she's just being a bitch. You know, and that's just how it is, it's how they are. Like that's the shit that people translate and take into real life, and they hear about their friend who's reaching out to them about trauma, and they're like, well, you're probably just going to be a bitch. You don't need to do that anymore. There are other ways of making good, kind-hearted people who are reserved, who are apprehensive, who are slow to go to certain things or do certain or be in certain spaces. You can still be a decent person and have dealt with trauma. And those can still impact your character. Because again, you don't want to make a character that people don't like. Because then we just want them to die. And if you have a weak antagonist at the same time, throw the whole project away. Just throw the whole thing away.
So one of the ways that we make them strong is we give them competence. and skills, and equip her with skills that help her navigate the scenario. So something God only puts you through things that you can handle, right? These skills can be traditional survival skills or unique talents that give her an edge. So just she might think that she's not going to make it through this thing, but she has the skills to do so.
Yeah. We were talking about this the other day when we were talking about a possible future project. And Aaron from Your Next. Golden example.
Yes. Brilliant.
Like, of the examples you can do in modern horror movies, Aaron from Your Next is the number one.
Yeah.
Because no one really knew about how she grew up on a survivalist installation. So when the family is being, taken out by assassins or hired killers, she's ready to respond, and boy does she. She's resourceful, she's intelligent, she's aware, she grabs hold of the situation. She's like, hey, this is what we can do to overcome this scenario. And I mean, I can't say more than the movie can tell you. So
yeah,
if you want a really great example,
You're Next. Yeah,
watch Your Next twice. It's just that good.
So we mentioned the difference between having stuff happen to the character and then reacting to it.
Right.
So we want to have realistic reactions. So portray a wide range of emotions, from fear to despair to determination and courage. Realistic reactions make the character relatable and believable. Yeah. So I feel like, yes, there are situations like Aaron in Your Next where the fear part isn't really there.
Right.
She just goes straight to the determination. And I admire that, but I want to see the vulnerabilities too. So
you're leaning more of a Sidney Prescott.
Or Oculus, like the female protagonist is both vulnerable and strong, not just strong, but determined, which makes her strong, to overcome and discover what is happening and the origins thereof.
It's been a while since I've seen Oculus.
It had Carrie Gilliam.
Sounds right.
It's Gilliam for sure, but I can't remember her first name. From Doctor Who.
We'll find that one.
Yeah. She also was in the Marvel movies as Thanatos' daughter that was the cyborg.
Nebula?
Yeah.
I had to pull out my MCU knowledge there. I don't think MCU when I do this show. That's the superhero channel that we don't have.
We have tons of strong females in the
I said that's the superhero channel that we don't have. We have a horror channel.
We have a horror channel. And there are horror situations in comics that I feel like we should do an episode on comic books.
Okay. We'll find time and find space for that.
That won't be till like season 4, but I'll put it in the notes and we'll figure it out.
Yeah, we're good.
So, growth and development. So without the reactions, we don't have growth.
Mm-hmm.
So how she evolves through the story. If she doesn't react, she doesn't evolve.
Yes.
And we want to see her grow through the story. She may not have the skills at the beginning of the story, but she gains the skills and the competency as the story progresses.
Yes.
The challenges she faces should lead to personal growth and a deeper understanding of herself and the world around her. So by the third act,
that's the internal versus external thing.
Yeah, exactly. Relationships and interactions, so supporting characters.
And this is where you have the ability to create complexity, because as Cabin in the Woods will point out, there's a lot of tropes that you have in horror in general.
Mm-hmm.
This character has this role, and that character has this role, and this character has that role, and it's how they interact which gives them strength or confidence, or create vulnerability and fear. If you know that if you realize the antagonist is your best friend, like I'll give some spoilers, but it's been out for 20 years. It's fine. In Urban Legend,
Mm-hmm.
she finds out the antagonist is her best friend, so now
Yeah.
she's reserved, because when it's
Perfect
someone
Blue
you
did the
care
same
about,
thing. Yeah.
Perfect
Blue did the same thing.
Yeah, and it's that best friend that this person you've loved and trusted has now caused you emotional scarring pain. That's going to have an impact on you if you harm someone very close to them, like a best friend or significant other, or
Mm-hmm.
even worse, a child. Then that will have a deep impact on you. Think about, I know we're talking about female characters, but the example is still there. Think about John Wick. They killed his dog. How dare they? It meant a lot to him, and that led to his reaction. I know we're talking about female characters, but I wanted to throw in you're not supposed to kill the dog.
Don't kill the dog.
It's one of those rules that we apparently have. You're not supposed to kill the dog. But it just shows that there are people close to the protagonist that if you want to create something emotional for them to respond to or react because of, having something happen to them or have the antagonist affiliated with someone close to them will have that impact.
Mm-hmm.
Going back to The Descent, while the best friend wasn't the actual antagonist per se, the truth about the best friend made her like an internal antagonist, like
For
the
sure.
struggle that the best friend had. When you learn the secret of the best friend, I know that movie's been out for like 20 years too, but I really want people to watch the Descent because it's so good.
Yeah.
The first one, not the second one. Don't watch the second one.
And that creates interpersonal conflicts, right? When the best friend is the antagonist. In many situations, the best friend starts as the mentor and slowly becomes the antagonist as the story goes on. So use relationships to create additional layers of tension and conflict. Her interactions can complicate her journey and add to the story's depth.
Yeah, it's like I need to save my child, or I need to defeat this bad guy. And now it's like, if I let this bad guy go, more people will suffer. But if I don't save my child, then I will suffer, and I will have failed as a parent. And that's a layer that it's hard to beat. And if you have parents watching this movie, it's you're going to get invested. You're going to get invested.
on that note, we are talking about representation regarding women in horror right now. And even though we are making them female, we should also strive for diverse representation. So avoid limiting her character to traditional gender roles or cultural stereotypes, or flip them on their head. You know, like there's a trope where that gets flipped over. She should be a fully realized individual with her own unique voice. So she doesn't have to be white.
Yeah, and that's it's harder to do now because there's a push for diversity, but now, at least in the United States, there's a big push against diversity in the same spaces, where it's like you put a black character in this space, it's like, oh, now the thing has to be, oh, now we're just looking at it, it's got to be woke, we're just doing it because of this.
Mm-hmm.
Listen, we're talking about stereotypes. We mentioned stereotypes before. And I say that the only time that there are spaces for stereotypes, and the space for stereotypes, the purpose is so that you can establish elements of a character without having to necessarily spell it out. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
It saves time, it saves dialogue. If you're like, oh, person here with this struggle. If you're from this place and this place is always war torn, or you show it in a war torn situation, we know it as a war torn, environment. We don't have to say they survived through war. We see it, we know it. Less
Mm-hmm.
you have to actually establish. But when you're looking at characters from foreign areas or characters from minority groups, Native American women, Black women, Asian women, Hispanic women, like they've all gone through their own separate societal traumas and issues, and those can be really, really elemental to a story. And as a level of complexity, and as you represent them, you can also celebrate them. I was talking briefly about The Blackening. It's a great movie. It's a more
I
newer
haven't
movie.
seen it.
It's a more newer movie. I think it was only released within the last 12 to 18 months. Fantastic movie, and I will not spoil it because it's so good. But all of the main characters in the friend group are Black. And the reason why I'm specifying in this particular movie, there are men, there are women, there are straight characters, there are queer characters, there are biracial characters, there's a character whose like family is from Africa, and it shows within this friend group the complexity of just the Black experience in America. Not every Black character is the same. And I brought this up because the part you want to be careful of when you're trying to represent any other marginalized group, really, if I'm being honest, any group, is that not every person that fits within this particular box of yours is going to have the same experience. Not every
Right.
white male will have the same experience. Not every white female will have the same experience. Not every Black male will have the same experience. You don't want to have every Black character grow up in the ghetto and parents sold drugs and did this stuff. That's levels of stereotypes we don't have to go through anymore. That was never my experience. Nothing even close as a Black man. And so if you're going to have a character that you want me to relate to, that ain't it. But if you have this where mom went to college, dad worked this really good job, brother went to college, got a great degree, good job, cousins are all successful, this family, that's my life experience. Does that mean I haven't gone through trauma? Yes, we have. We've all done the suffering. And just to remember, sort of like in summary of that, it's just that the Blackening is a great example of how everyone in a same group counts as a Black character, but they're
Right.
all complex, they're all different, they all have their own different experience, they all have their different a point of origin in a sense. And so if you are going to add diversity, not every queer character is the same. Not every letter means the same. So if you're going to have a queer female character, please take the time to understand the experience of that group. Best yet, find a person or a couple of people and make your character a blend of both of, or all of them. So it's a more realistic character that we can genuinely relate to.
Yeah, well put. I was looking up The Descent on streaming and also The Blackening, so I can watch those while I'm processing things later.
Blackening for one is for movie recommendation. A fantastic movie. It's funny, but it's deep and it's complex. So again, you get to see these female characters in their roles. They're battling against stereotypes while portraying kind of other stereotypes, but showing the truth, what's true and what's false in the Black experience.
Right.
I'm sure there are other movies that do the same thing for Latinas and for women and non-binary people of the queer community.
Yeah.
I just don't know what those titles are off the top of my head.
So what we're doing is we're subverting tropes, right? So play with genre conventions by subverting common tropes. For example, she can be a hero instead of a victim, or she can possess unexpected traits that challenge the typical horror narratives. Examples. Ripley is a prime example of a complex female protagonist. She's competent, brave, and resourceful, showing vulnerability without being defined by it. Her evolution from a crew member to a determined survivor highlights her depth and agency. Another one would be Clarice Starling in The Silence of the Lambs. She is intelligent, driven, and compassionate. Her background and personal stakes add layers to her character, and making her journey compelling and relatable, as well as, it makes us wonder how we would deal with such situations.
Yeah. And the interesting thing about Clarice is Clarice walks into the situation knowing the dangers, knowing the threat, and then actively tries to avoid it, actively tries to subvert it, and her success varies.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like sometimes she's like, I did great, I did good, and then she's like, oh no, I didn't.
And that's a trope in horror, most especially, but thrillers and stuff like that, is the or Monsters Inc. did it, where it's like a false win.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with the plot. It makes them feel accomplished, but it distracts them from the actual problem.
But it also creates that extra layer of I'm walking into this situation with confidence, and then I think I'm succeeding and I realize, oh, I did not succeed. Can I actually do this? Am I just lying to myself? And now you have this, I have a character that's not yet written yet. It's a piece for the future. But that's one of the struggles that she ends up going through. She is initially confident, but then she realizes that no one else has confidence in her. And that makes her kind of question, wow, should I actually have confidence in myself? And then she's forced into a situation where it's like, I don't have a choice but to succeed in this. So she's now fighting the antagonist and herself and she has to get through one struggle in order to succeed in the other.
And
Very much different.
that balance is important, I feel like. So we want to strive for balance between her physical and her emotional challenges. So both should contribute to her overall arc and the story's horror elements.
Yeah.
We also want to give reader empathy, right? So aim to create empathy by showing her struggles and her triumphs. Readers should be able to see parts of themselves in her, which makes her journey more engaging. So, and it's that Clarice syndrome I'm talking about, where we commiserate with her so much that we are living vicariously through her.
Yeah. And I think that's something that we should strive for as horror writers and creators in the space, that we're going to create a strong female character, whether she's protagonist or associated
An
character.
extra. Mm-hmm.
We want her to be relatable, to where, oh, I see you struggling the same struggle I struggle. It's not just you going through this. We're going through this together now. Now
Yeah.
we're going through this together because I've seen this. I want to see you get over it because I didn't successfully get through it. But if I see you do it, maybe next time I can. And sometimes that's the character you're creating. Sometimes that's what that character means to the viewer, whether it's through the book or through a movie or whatnot. You know, these are important elements. Like, you can make your character to where the audience, the one receiving, connects to where it's them now going through the struggle. I mean, that's an instant win. It's an instant
It's
win.
borderline second person, you know, the you, the we,
Yes.
Stuff
It gets
like that.
complicated for people.
But making it third person or first person makes it so that we live vicariously through and we trauma bond with them. That's why I like to read horror, is because for me there is benefit to my mental health that I am kind of processing my own traumas while reading theirs.
Yeah, and I know some authors. Given this subject, I'll keep the names to myself. But I know some authors that utilize their writing of horror as therapy. Like, that's
Mhm.
their whole purpose of writing the nuance and weird stories that they write. Is because, like, this is them going through it and overcoming it through the characters in these books.
Absolutely.
It's the truth, because there's all these characters. There's the reader, there's the characters themselves, and there's the author. And there's a lot of things that we've gone through that we translate to the page for ourselves. And then when the person picks the book up and meets you later on, it's like, hey, I read this, and this, you wrote my story. I felt seen, I felt heard, I felt validated for going through my struggle. Let's be honest, particularly with women, when women are going through some things and going through some traumas in real life, there's a lot of people around them that just don't get it.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be honest, as a guy, there's been some struggles that I've seen women go through I can't relate to. I didn't, I haven't gone through anything in that space. So while I can't relate, if she picks up a book and the character has gone through the same trauma she has, she doesn't look to me as that relating person anymore. So and so, Sarah Jones, whoever is the character she relates to, and she can trust that author has also gone through something, or at the very least understands. And I think a lot of times, especially those who watch and read and are entertained by horror, we want to be understood. Those who create horror, we want to be understood through our art. And I
I
think that's a
feel
big.
like I can't remember the name of the first book, but the girl who kicked the hornet's nest, um, very much so easy to commemorate or to
Commiserate.
commiserate with the main character. She wants revenge. She wants to justify her existence, and she overcomes whatever they've done to her, and it gives her drive to fuck their shit up. So,
and you know what? In real life, you can't do that. But you know what? I may not be able to attack 45 people who have harmed me. I can write about it in my book, though.
I can write about it in a book.
And if I want to do that and I pick up a book where this character I relate to does that, I can just now envision my struggle and trauma vicariously, like you mentioned, through the book, and just say, you know what? It happened in this fantasy world that I was a part of. I can take a little bit of that pressure off myself. And now that takes a little bit of that angst, that anxiety off of an otherwise really just impacted person. There's a lot of therapeutic exporting. That's not the word I'm looking for, but you get it.
Yeah.
A lot of like letting that out and like just letting it go that can happen through reading and experiencing horror. But none of that matters if we don't have strong characters that are complex, whose backstories and current situations are relatable to the people who are watching and reading it.
Well
And
put.
half the population's female, so that shows right there the importance of having an equally as nuanced and complex female character as we've so commonly made our male characters.
Absolutely. I feel that kind of wraps up nicely with a bow our our episode. But yeah. I'm sure we could go on and on and on about like the final girl.
I surely could.
Yeah. For those unfamiliar, the final girl is basically the last girl that the antagonists go after, because she fights back.
Right. She's sometimes the
target. And she's the survivor, right? So there's a movie called The Final Girl, which is where the term comes from, that totally kicks ass.
Or the blonde?
Yeah.
That's a good one.
That's a good one.
That's a good one.
That movie, again, I saw The Descent first, and then I saw The Final Girl, and I was like, we are going in a great direction.
And don't get me wrong, this has been around for a minute. I mean, when you have Final Girl conversations, we just had one a couple days ago, when you start having Final Girl talks, there's always your Laurie Strodes from Halloween. There's always your Sidney Prescotts from Scream.
Nancy was her face from
there's Nancy from and then of course you got Sarah from, I think it's Sarah from Chainsaw.
I think it's Sarah
Hardesty
from
Chainsaw. And you've got these final girls who have gone through all of this trauma, all of this struggle, and somehow overcame it all and was the last one standing, or amongst the last one standing. There's power in that. And I think that the reason why someone had asked us in that conversation, like, do we count the final guys? You know, the guy who survives at the end of it. I'm like, For the conversation we were having, yes, but there's a difference. It holds a little bit of a different weight when it's the final girl. And I believe that the reason why is, we have this societal standard that, yeah, the guy is strong, the man will survive, the man will overcome, the man will save the woman. But when it's the woman that overcomes it all, when it's the woman that overcame the societal expectation, and she was the badass at the end who overcame all that shit, yeah, like that, it just holds the different weight to it, I love the final girl. I do.
And so I'm writing a paranormal romance that is sapphic, and a vampire sapphic romance. And that means strong females all the way around. And that is a situation where we make the damsel save the hero, the male counterpart. And there's usually a counterpart, right? Be it the best friend or the boyfriend,
the boyfriend, the sister, the mama. There's always a counterpart.
It's all, yeah, exactly.
And you can explore all of those. Little side note: it doesn't always have to be the boyfriend. Doesn't always have to be the husband. It can be the mom, the dad, the grandmother, the child, the next door neighbor, the best friend, the sister. Never thought I'd use this as an example. But Frozen,
yeah,
like true love is always in that boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, king, queen kind of thing. That true love was an honest, true love amongst sisters. While it may not necessarily be a horror thing, so I'm walking, talking snowman. Well, that's a little scary in the middle of the woods. But that just shows you that you can take what you expect, like the true love kiss or whatever, or that expression of true love is how they put it. And it doesn't have to follow what you expect it to be. It doesn't have to be the husband or the boyfriend. None of that. It had to be the love expressed by her sister. That's love too. Those counterparts. Remember, counterpart just has to be a counterpart. Doesn't have to be romantic in nature. It doesn't have to follow these tropes. It doesn't. So just remember that. Be original. Don't just write the same thing everyone else is writing.
It makes me so mad that. So I love platonic relationships in books, especially horror books. So Laurel K. Hamilton did the Anita Blake series, right? And the first 5 books feature Edward, which is a fellow, not animator, but he is a protagonist for sure. But he is very strong and stern and doesn't have much of a sense of humor. And he is besties with Anita. And eventually the series turns into erotica, which, boo.
Sex sells.
When I started the series, I was like, this is an urban fantasy horror book that I love. And then, Bloody Bones came out, and there's more, they sprinkle in a little more and a little more and a little more. And I'm like, I want plot. I don't care if she screws the were-rat. I don't care. But people also read erotica and live vicariously through the people who are doing the things.
That's definitely a different show.
That is definitely a different show. But if you like this video at any point, I encourage you guys to like the video, like the stream. And if you want to see more streams like this one, you can catch us next Friday, where we interview Steve Zimmer, who is a publisher and writer of his own right. and picking his brain is going to be a blast.
If
You're
there's ever an episode for you to catch, next week's episode where we interview Steven Zimmer live right here, this channel, that's going to be the one. He's here to talk about his new book. He's got so much other things going on around him that we are going to press him on. You're going to learn a lot in this next episode. You need to be there. Go ahead and tell all your peoples about it. Tell them right now.
Yeah.
So you don't miss it.
You might want to hit subscribe and maybe even ring that bell on the off chance that YouTube actually notifies you when we go live. And we will catch you guys on the flip side.